In the marble courtyard of a billion-dollar empire, a homeless girl with bare feet did the impossible. She reached into a deaf child's ear and pulled out something alive. What happened next exposed a conspiracy so twisted, it shattered a father's world. But before we begin, drop a comment right now. Where in the world are you watching from? And what would you do if you discovered the people you trusted most had been poisoning your child for profit? Let's dive in. And hey, if you love stories that hit you right in the heart, do me a favor. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that'll make you think, feel, and question everything. Have you ever wondered what silence sounds like? Not the peaceful kind, the kind that traps you. The kind that turns your world into a glass cage where everyone else is laughing, crying, shouting, and you're just watching through the walls. That's where our story begins. Victor Brennan didn't build his empire by being soft. The man turned code into gold, transformed ideas into skyscrapers of glass and steel. Caldwell Tech Industries. Yeah, that Caldwell Tech, the one that makes half the devices in your pocket right now. That was his baby. Billions with a capital B. Power that could move markets with a single tweet. But all that money, all that influence, it couldn't buy him the one thing he wanted most. His son's voice. Leo Brennan was 10 years old, with dark eyes that saw everything and heard nothing. He'd been deaf since he was 2, some mysterious condition the specialists called progressive neurological hearing loss. Big words that basically meant, we don't know, and we can't fix it. Victor had tried everything. And I mean everything. Experimental surgeries in Switzerland. Sound therapy in Japan. Cochlear implant consultations with the best surgeons in America. He'd spent millions, literal millions, chasing a miracle that never came. Every doctor had the same rehearsed sympathy, the same gentle head shake, the same expensive bill at the end. We're sorry, Mr. Brennan. Some conditions are simply beyond our current capabilities. Leo stopped hoping around year 3. By year 8, he'd stopped even pretending to care when his father dragged him to another appointment. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, the Caldwell Tech courtyard was doing what it did best, intimidating people. Polished black marble stretched out like a frozen lake. Modern steel sculptures twisted toward the sky like metallic trees. The fountain in the center shot water 15 feet high, its mist catching the sunlight like diamonds. Employees in expensive suits hurried past, whispering about quarterly reports and stock prices. Nobody looked at the boy sitting alone on the marble bench near the fountain. Nobody except her. Isla appeared like a ghost nobody wanted to see. Thin as a bird, bare feet black with street dirt, wearing a faded dress that might have been blue once. She carried a wooden tray filled with little carved animals and wilted flowers she tried to sell to anyone who'd look. Security usually chased her off within minutes. But today, she'd slipped through the side service gate while the guards were dealing with a delivery truck. Her eyes found Leo immediately. There was something about him, the way he sat so still, so separate from the chaos around him. Like he existed in a different dimension from everyone else. She moved closer, slowly, watching him watch the world. Leo noticed her when her shadow crossed his line of sight. His eyes narrowed, wary, cautious. Street kids usually wanted something. Money. Food. Attention. But Isla just stood there, staring at him with this weird intensity. Then she did something that made his breath catch. She raised her hand and signed, hello. It was clumsy, unpracticed. Her fingers stumbled through the shapes like someone speaking a foreign language from a phrase book. But it was there. It was real. Leo's hands flew up instinctively. You know signs? Not much, she signed back, struggling. My brother couldn't speak. I learned some. Something shifted in Leo's chest. A crack in the wall he'd built around himself. This skinny street girl with dirt under her fingernails had just done something 90% of people never bothered to do. She'd tried to speak his language. I'm Leo, he signed. Isla, she responded, a small smile pulling at her cracked lips. She sat down beside him, just dropped right onto the marble bench like she owned the place. A few passing employees shot her disgusted looks, but she ignored them completely. Why alone? She asked. Leo shrugged. Always am. Then he did something he'd done 1,000 times before, rubbed his ear, wincing slightly. It was such a small gesture, so automatic he barely noticed anymore. But Isla noticed. Does it hurt? She signed. No. Itches. Inside. Always has. Doctors say nothing wrong. Isla leaned closer, squinting at his ear with the focus of a jeweler examining a diamond. Her head tilted. Her eyes narrowed. Hold still, she signed. What are you doing? There's something in there. Leo's heart skipped. Everyone said nothing was wrong. Every doctor in 3 countries had scanned, poked, tested. His father had spent enough money to buy a mansion just looking for answers. They all said the same thing. Neurological damage, irreversible, learn to cope. But this barefoot girl was looking at him like she could see something they'd all missed. Won't hurt, she promised with her hands. Trust me. Leo's brain screamed at him to pull away. But something in her eyes, something honest and raw, made him slowly, reluctantly tilt his head. Isla's fingers, small but surprisingly steady, moved toward his ear. He felt pressure, then an odd sensation deep in the canal. His body tensed. His jaw clenched. Stop, he tried to say, though no sound came out. Almost she mouthed, her face tight with concentration. Then suddenly she pulled. Her hand jerked back, and between her fingers writhed something dark and terrible. A blackened husk, brittle like a dead insect, but still twitching with sick life. Leo's whole body jolted. His chest seized. And then, a car horn blasted from the street outside the gate. Loud. Sharp. Real. Leo's hands flew to his ears, his eyes going wide with shock. His mouth opened, and a sound came out, rusty, broken, like a machine learning to work again. What was that? His own voice. After 8 years of silence. After 8 years of watching lips move and understanding nothing. After 8 years of living behind glass. His own voice. Isla's heart hammered in her chest. Tears stung her eyes. You heard it, she signed frantically. You heard it. Leo's face crumpled. Tears streamed down his cheeks. The fountain sprayed behind them. A pigeon cooed somewhere nearby. The rustle of leaves in the breeze. The distant rumble of traffic. Sound. Everything was sound. And then Victor's voice cut through the courtyard like a blade. What the hell is going on here? He charged toward them, phone still clutched in one hand, fury blazing in his eyes. He saw the filthy street girl's hands near his son's face. Saw Leo gasping, trembling, tears streaming down his cheeks. Get away from him. Victor roared. Security. Where the hell is security? No. Leo's voice cracked out, rough, unpracticed, but real. Victor froze. His son had just spoken. His deaf son had just spoken. The world tilted on its axis. Isla stood her ground, glaring up at the towering billionaire. She held out her palm, showing him the writhing black thing she'd pulled from Leo's ear. Something was stuck in there, she said, her voice steady and cold. For years. And nobody bothered to look close enough. Victor stared at the thing in her hand, at his son's moving lips, at the impossible moment unfolding before him. Dad, Leo whispered again, the word shaky but beautiful. And Victor Brennan, master of $1 billion empire, man who'd negotiated with presidents and crushed competitors, fell to his knees beside his son and wept. The fountain sprayed behind them, catching the afternoon light. And in that courtyard built to intimidate, something broke. Something far more valuable than money. You know that moment when your entire reality cracks open? When everything you thought was true turns out to be a lie. That's where Victor Brennan found himself, holding his son who could suddenly hear, staring at a barefoot girl who'd just done the impossible, and feeling his world collapse in on itself. 20 minutes later, Victor's black Mercedes tore through city traffic like a bullet. Leo sat pressed against him in the back seat, still trembling, still whispering to himself in wonder. Every sound was a revelation, the hum of the engine, the click of the turn signal, his own breathing. Isla sat across from them, silent, her hands still streaked with dried blood from whatever she'd pulled out of Leo's ear. Victor's mind was spinning. 8 years. 8 years of specialists, treatments, therapies. Hundreds of appointments. Millions of dollars. And a street kid with dirty fingernails had fixed it in 30 seconds. How? How? St. Raphael's Hospital, he barked at the driver. Emergency audiology. Now. The hospital doors flew open when they arrived. Victor's name carried weight. Doors opened, staff scattered, and within minutes they were ushered into a private examination room. White walls. Beeping machines. The antiseptic smell that clung to everything. Leo gripped his father's sleeve. Don't leave me, he rasped, his voice still rough and uncertain. Victor's throat burned. He'd heard those words signed 1,000 times. But hearing them spoken, it broke something inside him. I'm here, son. I'm not going anywhere. Nurses circled Leo, checking vitals, shining lights in his ears, murmuring medical jargon Victor barely registered. His hands shook. His usually sharp mind felt foggy, overwhelmed. 2 hours crawled by before the chief specialist finally entered. Dr. Harrison Garrison was everything you'd expect. Silver hair, expensive suit under his white coat, practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. He'd been Leo's primary audiologist for the past 6 years. Victor had paid him over $2 million. "Mr. Brennan," Garrison said smoothly, extending his hand. "Quite the remarkable event today." Victor didn't shake it. "Remarkable? My son can hear, doctor. After you told me for 6 years it was impossible." Garrison's smile tightened. "Well, the scans show residual blockage removed from the ear canal. These things can be unpredictable." Unpredictable. Victor's voice was dangerously quiet. "You charged me a fortune for machines, therapies, experimental treatments. You said he'd never hear. And a girl on the street fixed it with her bare hands. Sir, we followed standard medical protocol." "Protocol?" Victor slammed his palm on the examination table. The sound made Leo flinch, but Victor barely noticed. "I trusted you. I brought my son to you dozens of times. You scanned him, tested him, put him through hell. And you never saw what a homeless child spotted in 5 minutes." Garrison adjusted his glasses, a nervous tell. "Mr. Brennan, some conditions present in highly unusual ways." "Stop." Isla's voice cut through the room like a knife. She'd been sitting quietly in the corner, but now she stood, her bare feet silent on the tile floor. "You didn't look. You didn't want to look." "Excuse me." Garrison's professional mask slipped for just a second. "You saw his father's name and saw money. You saw a rich kid and saw a paycheck that would keep coming as long as the problem never got solved." Victor turned to stare at her. This skinny street girl, maybe 12 years old, was saying things he'd barely let himself think. "That's a serious accusation, young lady," Garrison said coldly. "And completely baseless." "Is it?" Isla pointed at Leo, who sat wrapped in a hospital blanket, still whispering to himself, amazed by the sound of rustling fabric. "He told me his ear itched inside for years. He told every doctor. Did anyone actually look? Or did you just run your expensive tests and collect your checks?" Garrison's jaw tightened. "Mr. Brennan, I don't have to stand here and be insulted by—" "Show me his file," Victor interrupted. His voice had gone quiet again. Deadly quiet. "Sir, his complete medical file. Everything. Now. That's highly irregular. I don't care." Victor stepped closer. "My son. My money. My file. Get it." Something flickered in Garrison's eyes. Fear, maybe. Or guilt. But he nodded curtly and left the room. Isla moved to stand beside Victor. Up close, he could see how young she really was, maybe 13 at most. But her eyes looked ancient. "Why did you help him?" Victor asked quietly. "Because no one helped my brother." Her voice was flat, emotionless. Scar tissue over an old wound. "Finn. He was 7 when he got an ear infection. We couldn't afford the clinic. By the time the free hospital saw him, it was too late. The infection spread. He went deaf then." She swallowed. "Then he died." Victor felt something twist in his chest. "I learned to spot the signs after that," Isla continued. "The way people hold their heads when something's wrong inside. The way they wince. I see things doctors miss because I'm looking, not billing." Before Victor could respond, Garrison returned with a thick folder. He set it on the table with a heavy thump. Victor flipped it open. Page after page of notes, scans, test results. All signed by various specialists. All reaching the same conclusion. Progressive neurological hearing loss. Irreversible. Continue supportive therapy. His hands starting to shake. Then he reached the back section. Administrative notes. Billing records. And there, clipped to the inside cover, was a memo on hospital letterhead. Confidential, Patient L. Brennan. Caldwell account approved for long-term therapy extension. Patient shows optimal response to continued treatment protocol. Recommend maintaining current diagnosis to ensure care continuity and preserve funding stream. Quarterly reviews sufficient. Victor read it once. Twice. 3 times. The words didn't change. Maintain current diagnosis to preserve funding stream. His vision blurred. The room tilted. "You kept him sick," he whispered. Garrison went pale. "Mr. Brennan, that memo is taken out of context. You kept my son deaf so you could keep billing me." Victor's roar shook the walls. "Sir, it's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple." Victor ripped the memo from the folder, his hands shaking with rage. "You monsters turned my son into a paycheck. You knew something was wrong, and you ignored it because treating him would end your gravy train. Security burst through the door, alerted by the shouting. Get out, Victor snarled at Garrison. Get out before I do something I'll regret. Mr. Brennan, please. Get out. Garrison fled, his expensive shoes squeaking on the tile. Victor collapsed into a chair beside Leo, his whole body shaking. The rage drained out of him, leaving only devastation. I'm sorry, he whispered to his son. God, Leo, I'm so sorry. I let them do this to you. Leo reached out and touched his father's sleeve. Not your fault, he said, his improving voice small but steady. It is, though. Victor's eyes burned. I trusted them because they had degrees and credentials. I trusted them because they were expensive. I thought money meant quality. I thought. He couldn't finish. Isla leaned against the doorframe, her arms crossed. Now you know what it feels like when money makes people deaf. Victor looked up at her. This child who'd lived harder in 13 years than he had in 45. You're just a kid. How do you know all this? Because on the streets, you hear everything the rich people stop listening to. She shrugged. You learn fast or you die. Silence fell over the room. Outside, nurses whispered. Machines beeped. The hospital lived its sterile, efficient life. But in that small examination room, 3 people sat with a truth that couldn't be scanned or billed or ignored. Leo leaned his head against his father's shoulder. What happens now? He asked quietly. Victor's jaw set. His hand stopped shaking. The grief hardened into something else, something cold and sharp. Now! He stood, still holding the memo. Now I burn it all down. Isla nodded slowly. Good. But you can't buy justice, Mr. Brennan. You have to fight for it. Then I'll fight. Victor looked down at her bare feet, really seeing her for the first time. And you're going to help me. Why would I do that? Because you understand something I forgot. Victor's voice cracked. That the most valuable things in life aren't for sale. He turned to Leo, who was listening to the hum of the fluorescent lights above them, still amazed by every sound. What do you hear right now? Victor asked softly. Leo smiled, really smiled, for the first time in years. Everything, Dad. I hear everything. Victor pulled his son close. Then you'll never have to hear silence again. Not while I'm breathing. Later, they stood outside under the harsh hospital lights. Victor's suit was wrinkled, his tie loose. He stared at the glowing emergency sign above the entrance. They silenced you for profit, he murmured to Leo. They stole 8 years from you. From us. Isla watched him carefully. So what now? You sue them? Ruin them? More than that. Victor's eyes were hard as diamonds. I expose them. Every doctor. Every memo. Every lie. The whole world is going to know what they did. And after? Isla pressed. After the lawsuits and the headlines? What about the next kid whose parents can't afford to fight? Victor turned to her. What are you saying? I'm saying revenge feels good, but it doesn't fix the system. Isla's voice was steady. If you really want justice, don't just tear them down. Build something better in its place. Victor stared at this impossible child who'd just taught him more about humanity than any business school ever had. You're right, he said finally. Will you help me? Only if you actually listen to him this time. She pointed at Leo. Not just hear, actually listen. Victor knelt beside his son. Deal. And in that moment, under the cold hospital lights, something new began. Not revenge. Revolution. 3 weeks can change everything. 3 weeks ago, Leo Brennan lived in silence. 3 weeks ago, Victor Brennan believed money could solve any problem. 3 weeks ago, Isla was just another invisible street kid nobody cared about. But 3 weeks can also expose the truth. And when the truth comes out, the world listens. The press conference was set for 2 p.m. on a Wednesday. The main auditorium at Caldwell Tech headquarters, the same building where this whole story began, was packed wall to wall. Journalists from every major network. Cameras everywhere. The energy in the room crackled like electricity before a storm. Victor stood backstage, adjusting his tie for the 5th time. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. Leo sat beside him, wearing a small microphone clipped to his collar. His voice had improved dramatically over the past weeks. Speech therapy, practice, and the pure joy of finally being able to hear himself talk. But he was still nervous. You don't have to do this, Victor said quietly. I can tell them myself. Leo shook his head. No, they need to hear it from me. My voice. The one they tried to steal. Isla stood by the door, wearing clean clothes for the first time in years. Jeans and a simple blue shirt that Victor had bought for her. She'd refused to wear anything fancy. "I'm not your trophy," she'd told him. "I'm here to tell the truth, not look pretty for cameras." Victor had learned not to argue with her. "2 minutes, Mr. Brennan," a staff member called out. Victor took a deep breath. In his briefcase was everything: medical records, internal memos, billing statements, recordings of phone calls with hospital administrators. Evidence that would destroy careers. Evidence that would spark investigations. Evidence that would change everything. But more than that, he carried something else. A promise. "Ready?" he asked Leo. His son nodded, standing up. "Let's go." They walked onto the stage together. The camera flashes were blinding. The murmur of voices rose like a wave. Victor stepped up to the podium, Leo beside him, Isla hanging back slightly but visible. Victor cleared his throat. The room went silent. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. 3 weeks ago, my son Leo was deaf. He'd been deaf for 8 years. I'd spent millions of dollars on specialists, treatments, and therapies. Every expert told me the same thing. His condition was irreversible. Neurological damage. Nothing could be done. He paused, letting that sink in. They were lying. The room erupted. Questions shouted from every direction. Camera flashes intensified. Victor raised his hand. "Please, let me finish." He pulled out the memo from his briefcase and held it up. "This is an internal document from St. Raphael's Hospital. It recommends maintaining my son's diagnosis, keeping him deaf, to preserve the funding stream. In other words, they kept him sick because treating him would cost them money." The journalists went wild. Pens flew across notepads. Phones captured every word. But here's what they didn't count on. Victor placed his hand on Leo's shoulder. They didn't count on someone actually caring enough to look. Someone who wasn't motivated by profit. Someone who saw my son as a person, not a paycheck. He gestured to Isla. This young woman, Isla, found what million-dollar machines couldn't. Or wouldn't. A physical blockage in Leo's ear canal that had been there for years. Something that could have been removed in minutes if anyone had bothered to truly examine him. Isla stepped forward slightly, uncomfortable with the attention but refusing to hide. "So today, I'm announcing several things," Victor continued. "First, I'm filing criminal charges against Dr. Harrison Garrison and 4 other specialists involved in Leo's care. Second, I'm releasing all medical records and communications to federal investigators. And third," he paused, his voice thickening with emotion. "Third, I'm establishing the Finn and Leo Foundation, named after my son and Isla's brother, who died because his family couldn't afford proper medical care. This foundation will provide free hearing clinics, diagnostics, and treatment to low-income families. No child will ever be ignored again because they can't pay. And no child will ever be exploited because they can." The room erupted again, but Victor stepped back. "Now, I'd like my son to say a few words." Leo stepped up to the microphone. He was small for 10, but in that moment, he seemed bigger than the room. "Hi," he said, his voice clear and strong. "My name is Leo Brennan, and for 8 years, I lived in silence. You could hear a pin drop. I watched people talk. I learned to read lips. I communicated through signs. But I never heard my dad say he loved me. I never heard music. I never heard rain. I never heard my own voice." His hands gripped the podium. "The doctors told my dad I'd never hear. They said it was impossible. They ran tests and scans and gave him big medical words that meant nothing. But they never just looked. They never cared enough to actually see me." Tears streamed down faces in the audience. Even hardened journalists were wiping their eyes. "Isla cared," Leo continued. "She didn't have fancy equipment. She didn't have a medical degree. She just looked. And she gave me back the world." He turned to face the cameras directly. "So if you're watching this and you're a doctor or a nurse or anyone who treats people, please, don't just see symptoms. Don't just see money. See the person. Because every person deserves to be heard." He stepped back, and the room exploded with applause. The fallout was immediate and massive. By that evening, #SilenceForProfit was trending worldwide. News outlets ran the story on every channel. Medical ethics boards launched emergency reviews. Dr. Garrison was arrested at his home at 6 a.m. the next morning. 3 other doctors followed within days. But Victor wasn't satisfied with destruction alone. 2 months later, the first Finn and Leo Foundation clinic opened in the neighborhood where Isla grew up. Free hearing tests. Free treatment. No questions asked about insurance or ability to pay. Isla stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, scissors in hand, still uncomfortable with attention but refusing to hide from what she'd started. "I wish Finn could see this," she whispered to Victor. "He can," Victor replied softly. "And he's proud of you." The clinic saw 50 patients in its first week. By month 3, they'd helped 200 children. By month 6, there were plans for 5 more clinics across the country. Leo became a volunteer, using his story to comfort scared kids who thought they'd never hear. He learned advanced sign language, not just the basics, but fluency. "Some people will always be deaf," he explained to his father. "That's okay, but they should have the choice. And they should be seen." One afternoon, about 4 months after the press conference, Victor found Isla sitting alone in the original Caldwell Tech courtyard. The same place where everything had changed. The fountain still sprayed water toward the sky. But now, the courtyard was open to the public. The intimidating marble had been softened with benches and gardens. People came here to rest, to think, to breathe. "Hey," Victor said, sitting beside her. "You okay?" Isla shrugged. "Just thinking about how weird life is. For months ago, I was selling flowers to people who wouldn't look at me. Now I'm—" She gestured vaguely at everything around them. "Now you're family," Victor said simply. She looked up at him, eyes uncertain. "You don't have to keep me, you know. You already did the foundation thing. You already changed everything. I can." "Isla." Victor's voice was firm but gentle. "You're not a project. You're not charity. You're my daughter's age. You're brilliant, you're fierce, and you've taught me more about humanity than 45 years of life ever did. So yeah, you're family. Family. If you want to be." Isla's eyes filled with tears, the first time he'd ever seen her cry. "I want to be," she whispered. Victor pulled her into a hug. This strange, impossible child who'd changed his entire world. Leo found them there 20 minutes later, his tablet in hand. "Dad, you need to see this." He showed them the screen. A news article. Medical Ethics Board announces nationwide reforms following Brennan case. Mandatory patient advocacy reviews for all long-term treatment plans. "They're changing the rules," Leo said, grinning. "Because of us." Victor read the article, his throat tight. "Because of you too," he corrected. "I just had the money. You had the courage." They sat there together as the sun set over the city. A billionaire who'd learned that wealth meant nothing without humanity. A boy who'd reclaimed his voice. And a girl who'd reminded the world what it meant to truly listen. 6 months after that, on a warm spring evening, the 3 of them stood on the roof of Caldwell Tech headquarters. The city sprawled below them, lights twinkling like stars. "You know what I hear now?" Leo asked suddenly. "What?" Victor replied. "Hope." Leo smiled. "Every time we open a new clinic. Every time a kid hears their parent's voice for the first time. Every time someone actually listens instead of just taking notes. I hear hope." Isla leaned against the railing. "My brother died because the system failed him. But maybe he didn't die for nothing. Maybe his silence started something. More than something," Victor said. "A revolution." He looked at the 2 children beside him, so different from each other, yet bound together by tragedy and triumph. "You know what I learned from all this?" he asked. "What?" they said together. "That the most important things in life can't be bought, scanned, or measured. They can only be given freely. Compassion, courage, justice, love." He put his arms around both of them. "And sometimes the people who change the world aren't the ones with the most power or money or credentials." "Then who are they?" Leo asked. Victor smiled. "The ones brave enough to look when everyone else turns away. The ones who refuse to let silence win." Below them, the city hummed with life. Somewhere a new clinic was opening. Somewhere a child was hearing for the first time. Somewhere someone was finally being seen. And in that moment, standing together under the stars, they understood something profound. Justice isn't bought. Truth isn't silenced. And sometimes, all it takes to change the world is one person brave enough to reach into the darkness and pull out the light. So here's my final question for you. When was the last time you really looked, not just glanced, but truly saw someone the world had forgotten? When was the last time you listened to a voice that wasn't asking for anything except to be heard? Drop your answer in the comments. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because some truths are too important to stay silent. And if this story moved you, hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications. Because there are more stories out there. Real stories about real people who changed everything by simply refusing to give up. Until next time, keep listening. Keep looking. Keep caring. Because that's how we change the world. One voice at a time.